The balance point for your organization is not the same as for every other organization either, because just like people, there are infinite individual differences between organizations. And that requires you to take a strategic approach, understanding what your core competencies are, what your stakeholders expect and want and need from you, and then designing systems around those fundamentals. And those fundamentals will lead to conversations about existing processes. And what if we could collapse that from 9 steps into 2? The ones that get it right are the ones that collapse down the right processes, not just processes that are intuitive and the ones that come to mind first.
Welcome to Zero Shot, the AI podcast without the hype, built for one reason, to be the source you actually trust when it comes to AI and business. Every week, we're bringing you the conversations, the breakdowns, and the honest analysis that help you make better decisions in a space that's moving incredibly fast, the world of AI. I'm Llew Jury, the Managing Director of Advancer, where we build quality AI for every Australian business. And as always, I'm joined by the one and only James Gauci. Hi, James.
G'day, Lou, and hello to everyone around the world. And a big welcome to anyone joining for the first time. The noise around AI, as we know, is absolutely overwhelming. I'm James Gauci, the CEO of Cadent, and we build and govern AI in high-risk settings. And Lou and I are two people who live inside the industry every day. But we all know that we're in this together at the end of the day. And that's exactly why we built this show, Zero Shot, for everyone out there looking for a steady hand through the AI revolution.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is what today's really about. If you spend any time around AI, this world of artificial intelligence, maybe you've built an automation, had a dabble, maybe watched someone demo something and thought, I should be doing more of this, then you're exactly who we're talking with today. We're calling it Process Automation today, episode 24. And, building things from scratch, and we're going to go right back to first principles, aren't we, James, in terms of how to think about this? Because honestly, the foundations most people are working from are already out of date. And here's the thing. What we are giving you today is not a tool tour that is stale in about 6 minutes or 6 months' time, if it lasts that long, James. It's a way of thinking, a mental model that you can actually carry with you that holds up as the tools keep changing dramatically underneath us.
That's it. We've got 3 moves we're going to make today. We're going to go in the direction of how we actually got here. So from the world of kind of rigid deterministic automation through to the age of AI agents, so that you understand that the capabilities have changed and we can start to get into the zone of, all right, well, how have these capabilities changed? How do we need to challenge our existing assumptions about how technical systems work? And then the shift that changes everything is the second section, why automation isn't anymore just about structured data and fixed rules and what that unlocks. And finally, we'll get into what this means before you build. So how to think about where to apply it, including in regulated and compliance-heavy industries where people assume it's impossible or too hard to be viable. So by the end, you'll know not just what to build, but you'll know how to think about building it. So let's go.
And talking about building, James, a quick shout out to our sponsor, Prompt Cowboy. And if it fits today perfectly, because the engine behind a lot of modern automation is a good AI prompt, isn't it? And most people write vague ones. And promptcowboy.ai helps you build a clear, structured prompt every time. And if today gets you started on an automation, the one thing that can actually make it work is Prompt Cowboy, and do the agent setting, by the way, in the actual chat window there. So head on over to promptcowboy.ai. Tool of the week, James. What are we discussing? What have you been dabbling with and having a play with?
Off the back of our conversation last week, I pulled out Open Whisper and I've been using it very, very liberally. It's got some neat hidden features in there as well. And the thing that I found most interesting was when I updated my Claude client, the desktop client, and I tried to use Open Whisper in my Claude desktop client, it wouldn't let me paste into it, which was very, very strange and somewhat adversarial between the two systems. So yes, there is definitely some don't use this, use our native thing kind of fighting happening. Data has value, metadata has value, metadata has value in the world of machine learning. So that was my tool of the week, and I strongly recommend trying it out because it allows you to use local models for all of your inference. So if you're in a sensitive sector like finance or health or what have you, you can run your language model on your machine that tidies up the transcripts that are taken by the voice to text model, which also runs on your machine. No data egress at all, and no reporting to third parties. So very, very cool. How about you,
Wow.
Lou? Tools, news? Tell me about it.
Wow. So definitely not as technical as that, and that's a really cool thing. I'm sure there's people nodding out there going, "Wow, that's super cool," and I'm going to go and rewind on the episode and just play that back. And I'm sure they're not going to play back what I'm about to say because I've been going back to the future. I've been, I've been there thinking about how we can increase our own automation. This is a bit like the painter's house, James. You go over to painters' houses and it's never ever finished. The walls are all unpainted and things like that. We do a lot of automation. We do a lot of agentic builds. We do a lot of data lakehouses. We're doing a lot of AI training with clients, but you got to eat drink your own champagne. You got to eat your own lunch, right? So today, just today in the last few days, we've been basically building the right automations into our own sales CRM processes. And so I've been using Airtable and Zapier and my Squarespace website, feeling like I'm going back, which is actually going to be about our next segment. But I just wanted to give a shout out, and I showed you guys before. I'm actually using Claude in the browser now to do it for me while I'm doing something else. We had a catch up before with Yenia and yourself and myself, and we love having catch ups. We just keep talking, don't we, James? And the whole thing was I showed you guys it was running in the browser, so anybody can and hook this up, and that's going to be something we're going to talk about in a sec. So probably a really good segue to dive right into it. The first segment, James, how we actually got here with this whole world of automation, and we want to cover it from a different angle today about this is grounding this, isn't it? It's not so much about the yell and sell and doing YouTube videos and showing them how to use N8N and all that sort of stuff. It's something that we want to talk about the history of. And let's open it up with a question for you, mate, in terms of for someone that's used, Zapier style automation many moons ago. What's the difference between between that you used to use and also the possibilities now? And what's actually changed under the hood as we talk about automation?
Yeah, to put it in really simple terms, the capabilities of what we're dealing with are just dramatically different to what we've been used to for most of what we've called the digital transformation era. A lot of the time we've been used to using deterministic systems, logical systems, rules-based systems, if this, then that. There was literally a platform like Zapier called If This, Then That, which still exists, I think. We've got Apple shortcuts on our phone. We've had those for years and years. Like these kinds of systems are deterministic. So there's only one or a set of limited outcomes that you can automate for. So if I walk into my house, my geolocation is my house, then turn on all the smart light bulbs. And if it's after 6 p.m., put them on the warm setting, like that kind of automation. Whereas what with the kind of era we're walking into now is where we have probabilistic systems. So these are systems that are going to take in far more variables than we're used to providing, and sometimes completely unstructured variables as well, like a full document or a full textbook or an image or whatever kind of unstructured data you might have. And it derives some meaning from it, and then it makes a guess about what the next action should be. So with that comes a change in mentality, because what once required a lot of decision making up front now is more about implementing and tuning after the fact. So a good example is recently we were working with a professional services customer of ours, and they work with vulnerable communities. And what they wanted to do was ingest some structured information into their CRM so that they could do a compliance process on that information. And when we told them that not only can we do the OCR, or like the optical character recognition of what's in those PDF documents, we can go to the extent of giving you a draft compliance outcome based on the rules that you give us and the policies you give us and the procedures you give us. And that just absolutely blew their mind. And so for even technical people who are used to rules-based ways of working with technical systems and deterministic ways of working, the fact that we can now ingest all sorts of unstructured data and then produce structured outputs and streamline a lot of previously very manual processes, it's really a step change in the way that we start to think about solving problems in technology. And it's something that I wish everybody had that understanding of, so that we could have, these conversations faster. We could make these kinds of decisions a little bit faster and with more confidence.
And I think the big key there, James, is that still there's businesses running on the old way of doing things. These systems that don't need reasoning, they don't need, they follow simple rules, don't they? And they don't need to adjust to anything. And they're kind of running the economy in a way. There's a lot of people that have set up Zapier, but Zapier being the OG of this whole world, and there's still Zapier experts out there that will go into your business and set that up. And you know what? Sometimes that's all a business might need. A real micro business or an SME, that is perfectly fine. As I said just before in the intro, to take a Squarespace form, send it off to an email, and then that email then drops it in through Zapier into my Airtable. I go into Airtable, I do a bit of an automation inside Airtable, and I assign it to someone. That is really good and a really great success for a small business. Now, what you can do there is add reasoning, right? And the break to all of this that's changed from 20 years ago when we've been using Zapier. It feels like dog years, doesn't it, James? In terms of, it feels like 100 years that we've been using very, simple rule-based, systems that follow rules and stick to very one-dimensional characteristics. We've been using for so long, but now we've added reasoning, and the difference between a workflow that actually needs everything in the right box and one that can actually read a messy email or some messy logic or do some research, which is what we do for one of our outreach agents, and then act upon that is very, very different, isn't it? And this is probably the biggest shift that we probably need to, talk about with the audience, is that you can still do all of that, but there's awesomeness just around the corner if you just add some of these amazing bits of kit to the tools that you've got.
One of the analogies that I've drawn with it, and this is probably says more about me than anything else, but I liken it to something I learned in my undergrad, which is I did psychology as an undergrad many years ago. And one of the things we learned about was personality psychology, and how for a long time we were using categorical models of understanding people. Like we try and put people into buckets and we say, oh, okay, you're an extrovert or you're an introvert, right? And that was the way that we thought of the world, was in binary terms. However, in the 60s and 70s, continuous models of personality started to come out. So they were using full distributions along curves and preferences and things like that. So we got an example is the Big Five, the ocean model of personality, which basically has unlimited resolution on how to define the traits that make up your personality and your tendencies, more so than whether you are an introvert or are an extrovert. It puts you on a continuum between introvert and extrovert. And so this is the same thing happening for computer science now. Because we're using probabilistic systems every day, we're putting everything on a curve. It's not one or the other. It's where is the best fit on this curve. And that's not just an analogy. That's literally underneath the hood how these systems work, which is that was one of the things that made me tweet and go, hey, I think I like AI when I started working in it.
And same, there's a lot of maths, there's a lot of neuroscience, and there's a lot of psych behind everything we do, isn't there? And that's the key message, that it's not just if this, then that anymore. It's actually moving definitely in a different direction, and really rapidly allowing businesses to really use these agents and use these automations to think for themselves and actually process things for themselves within the right guardrails, of course. So, in terms of commercially, James, what are you seeing in the commercial world? Are businesses in your world getting stuck? I mean, I don't mind talking to this from all the businesses I talk about and talk with. But what about in your world? Government, compliance, regulation, all of that. Are we still using automation and sort of 10-year-old automation?
Well, look, I mean, every time you talk about AI in the public sector, robo-debt comes up. And, my wife was caught up in robo-debt. Like, she had a debt from when she was at uni 20 years ago or something like that. And it wasn't even a real debt. It was an invented debt. And she just got the notification the other day, you're going to get some money from the class action lawsuit because that was wrong and blah, blah, blah. But that was all deterministic models. That was not AI. But in public sector, the maturity, I'm probably talking a year and a half ago now, the maturity back then was not there. There wasn't an understanding that these were different kinds of systems. All we knew was this was automated. But what we're seeing now is that there is such an economic imperative on publicly funded organizations to find new efficiencies and find new effectiveness using the same old resources that people are being forced into zones of discomfort. But like the good news is that these capabilities do exist, and if they can be used responsibly and safely and within the interests of all the stakeholders involved, you can get some absolutely incredible outcomes. But yeah, we are still having that education discussion. It's a lot more advanced than it was even 6 months ago, but we're still there. How about you, Lou? You're very much in the kind of mid-sized business space, the commercially orientated space. Why do businesses get stuck on the old model? And like, is it cost? Is it knowledge? Is it just not knowing or being educated on the new capabilities that are at hand? Like, tell me a bit about that.
Yeah, I think all of the above, and I think it's about legacy as well. And I think what from a legacy point of view, someone might have come into the organization and set up some of those Airtable automations or some Zapier automations or something for them, and they've been running successfully in the background of the organization until they break, of course, and you get an alert and you got to go and fix your Zap and stuff like that. Everybody out there who has done that knows exactly what we're talking about. I think it's legacy based, and I think often it's people that have been in before. It's a bit like a Power BI developer. We seem to be unearthing a lot of those, James, don't we? Power Automate and Power BI developers that have been sort of in there for 4 years building Power BI dashboards at fairly expensive rates that AI dashboards can now replace very, very quickly and a lot more cost effectively. And I think it's a bit like that. I think what we're seeing in the commercial space is a combination of both. Organizations generally that are brave, and we often use the term brave in terms of taking a step that doesn't disrupt the business operations and the BAU, but actually has an opportunity to try out some innovation on the side
Mm,
within a cost-effective way, are the
mm,
ones that actually can really get into the autonomy of the agents. And actually what we're talking about is, the interpretation and the decision making of these more, agentic automations within N8N or Make, or, even into the other agent harnesses we're going to talk about. So there's organizations having not just a play, not just a proof of concept, they're actually building real applications within that realm. And on the side, they're also doing half a dozen of these small agentic based, rule based agents that are actually transforming other, maybe less, not innovative, but less action areas of the business. And by that, I mean, they don't need it. They don't need autonomous agents running around and doing something in zero
mm.
and, chasing people on receivables and all that. They just need to get a delivery message out quicker to someone. And so they're actually using this opportunity, if you like, to really grow the presence of even SMS, reminders and email reminders. And so a lot of companies are getting automation by default. They're getting automation because the agentic world is pulling them along. But I think there's
Mm,
room for both still. I don't think everybody needs to go fully in across every part of a medium to large size business and try and
yeah.
build agents across the whole thing. There is LinkedIn people that think they can build massive orchestrations and look at my screen and aren't I great? I just don't think that's viable for many, many businesses.
It absolutely isn't, and it's not for the same reasons that shadow IT was a challenge. Like, there were amazing, well-intentioned, and highly capable people who were using shadow IT to solve intractable problems in businesses
Mm.
throughout the 2000s and the 2010s. And a lot of what we now consider to be normal, we owe to those kind of well-intentioned vigilantes, you might call them. But the the change that's happening now, we have a different kind of governance mindset when it comes to these kinds of technologies, when it comes to digital technology overall, I would probably say. And it means that when you're in an organization and you are doing something that's on the edge, it's not that you're doing something that is the same as what was happening before. We're actually handling much more powerful systems than we were before, and much more risky systems than we were before if they're used in the wrong way or recklessly, or without the right training or capability. And so I think it's appropriate that, we do take a step back, but we also, as potentially business leaders or as governors of these systems, create the spaces for the innovation to happen. Give them the little bit of budget that will allow them to solve the problem for you, because it's not possible for every head of IT to also be somebody as capable as a head of AI in AI, for example.
Yeah. And look, a question for the listeners, I suppose, in a bit of a challenge. Think about one process in your business that I suppose you've already automated or tried to automate. You've given it a crack, and was it the rigid kind? Was it the structured kind? Was it a fixed rule? And what about your data? Was it on clean data? So were you trying to do something that just wouldn't work because of the data in your SharePoint or something wasn't right? It's amazing how much SharePoint we talk about, James, isn't it? Having to build new SharePoint for AI, things like that.
When everybody realizes when they're working with Microsoft that it's SharePoint all the way down, they
Very
go,
deep.
"Oh, really? Okay, cool. Now I
Very,
understand."
very, very deep. And by the way, the file that you called _draft_final_send to James, that might be trained on your models and trained on all of this world
Mm,
that we're talking about. So make sure it's clean. But
engineer
in
your
terms of the
context for sure.
yeah, in terms of the question for the listeners, if you take that example, because over the next couple of minutes, we're going to go back and look at what, if you were going to rebuild something, what
Mm.
in a new way, what would you do with your own example? So we want to keep it live. So it's probably a good time to dive into the shift. James, do you want to talk about the shift that
Mm.
changes everything
Mm.
in terms of the decades and things like that, and where we've come from and where we're heading?
Yeah, for sure. Look, anything you were automating, let's say 10 years ago, had to be structured information and had to be clean. Otherwise, you were going to get problems, essentially.
Mm.
And those kinds of problems could be many and varied. Like I remember the days working in a very high volume, very high value e-commerce circumstance. And we were dealing with custom APIs and a custom e-commerce system and just everything custom in every direction. And there was a person whose job it was to go and manually update the data for every one of the many dozens and sometimes hundreds of exceptions that this system would throw every day. And it took us a year, 2 years to get those, like, let's say it was 100 exceptions every day down to kind of 5 or 10
Wow.
and probably several $100,000. But the value was there. Don't get me wrong. Like the customer service was much better as a result. Tick, tick, tick. It was a great success. And that person was such an expert on all the exceptions. They got promoted and they knew all the ins and outs of the business, which is fantastic. But we don't need that level of structure anymore because if we are able to ingest a PDF or ingest language and infer meaning from it, or ingest an image and infer meaning from that, we can start to build other alternative kinds of models of categorization or tolerance around what kind of content is there or what kind of content is not. And so we have to think about it in terms of unstructured data now in ways that we have been trained out of, that IT always used to say no to.
Mm.
And the other dimension that I'd like to open up the can of worms on is the difference between autonomy and automation and how the two kind of live together and can be nested within one another. Because automation is kind of the nuts and bolts logic, if this, then that. But autonomy is when we give a system a menu of actions it might be able to take
Mm.
within a certain environment. And, that might be a secure environment or it might be the whole public internet. It's up to us and how we design the system. So those are the two things. It's the structure versus unstructured and the automation versus the autonomy. Those are the two zones that maybe we can play in for the next part of our discussion, Luke.
We should, and there's a couple of keywords that everybody should be aware of as well. That the guardrails around all that, plus context. Context, the C word. Word of the year for me, 2026. All of that autonomy, you need to have context, and you need to be driving that. So we might be able to reflect on that as well. So, yeah, it's to me, it's an interesting time. People are really enjoying data, James. They're enjoying data because you go and see organizations and you're like, how's your data? And they go, well, we've heard, bad data in equals bad data out. Absolutely. Well done. And then you ask, yeah, do you have a SharePoint like we were talking about before? Yes, we've got a SharePoint. How is it? Has it got a lot of those drafts that are a little bit messy and things like that? Yep, absolutely. Next question. Do you have a data warehouse? Yep, we've got a data warehouse. We moved from Excel to Access in 2005, and then we went from Access to SQL, and now we're on an SQL version. We kind of know where it is, but we've got a data warehouse now being our transformative layer, and our ETL, effectively, our transformation that is coming out of that. Okay, that's awesome. Did you know, client, that AI likes unstructured data? It likes to feed on unstructured data. So we actually don't like an ODBC database, object database, or sorry, a relational database, not ODBC. It's a relational database that we've been using for 30 years, right? From FileMaker Pro days into, as I said, Access, which wasn't secure, into SQL, into all of those worlds. So actually, what we need to do is we need to do some transformation here, because if you want to get the best out of, let's start with your automations and then your autonomous agents with, your agent harnesses. You're going to need to have this all done in what's called a data lakehouse, which combines structured data and unstructured data. And then it's like, can we just use SharePoint? Well, it comes back to your first point about, well, you could use SharePoint. However, how many PDFs have you got in there?
Mhm.
Because PDFs, they can be read by AI, but it's very difficult. And you're going to burn a lot of tokens, especially if we've
Lots of
got
tokens, yeah.
console.anthropic hooked up and you've got Llew Jury's credit card in there. And you see when I'm topping up the credit card walking along the street because I've blown through so many tokens, like most of us are doing recently, then you start to think, right, okay, maybe I need to get my house in order. So I
Mm.
thought I'd frame that whole sort of the shift that's changing everything around actual clients. That's a real life, multiple client type journey that I've been on.
Mm.
And I think these data lakehouses are critical for the larger organizations. And we've got organizations now moving across to them and really relying on them. And what they do is they ingest critical data pieces as their go to market on this. And before we even open up the books to start, or get the pen out to start designing up, metaphorically, the AI agents, we actually get their data in order, and that is around some data lake houses, and that is basically ingesting things like financial data. We've got a client ingesting the last up to 20 years of data. We've got payroll data. We've got HubSpot data. We've got general information. So that's all the the APIs that you're calling in from all of the key systems. You blend that with all of the data warehouse information, and then you go looking for all of the files that are out there, the Excel spreadsheets and all of the unstructured data and all the other stuff that's, it's a bit sort of fugazi, Wolf of Wall Street. So I think that's where we're up to. And this is the shift. This is the foundation to me out in the commercial world. I haven't even mentioned the word AI. I haven't even mentioned the word agentic or autonomous. I haven't even done an agent harness just to get to the level that actually we can feed, or the agent can feed on this. It's super important that the shift is understood, because from the first part of this segment that we just talked about, very different. It's not doing a hell of a lot. It's doing an if this, then that. I'll
Mm.
leave it there. James, over to you, because I've just given my lecture of the day.
Yeah, hop down off your soapbox, Lou. It was getting a bit much there.
Cheers.
No, I think you're exactly right. That there are a lot of conversations that we're having which are on replay from 10 odd years ago, which is, if we haven't got our data governance in order, then it's not that we can't start using AI. It's just that we have to adapt our approach to probably some lower value, higher volume kind of stuff. And it's in those kinds of environments where people are like, can it check my emails for me? Whereas in high maturity data governance environments, they're like, okay, we've got this massive data set of super valuable data. We know it's unstructured, but that's what makes it valuable. How can we unlock incredible new value out of that data set? Because we knew this day was going to come. And it's a lot of fun to have those kinds of conversations as opposed to the same old one about checking your email. That's not to say that checking your email isn't an effort intensive and sometimes grinding process. It's more that, from a strategic business perspective and from a leadership perspective, you want to be pulling those big levers, not the smaller levers, in order to prove the value within your own organization in a way that's going to mean unique competitive advantage for you, which is a little bit of a different way of thinking. Where does this messy data capability actually change what a company can do day to day, Lou? Once you've laid in all of those aspects that you were talking about, what can we do as a result?
It's just awesome. It's so awesome. I have to tell everybody, most data lakehouses have what's called an MCP link that's generated from that. And you do all that great work that I just talked about, and you can build this model context protocol type play that gives you a link, and you just hook that up to your agent. Literally, you could do it in Terminal right now with Claude Code and say, here's my MCP link. connect this to the agent that you're building. Now, you've got to do a little bit more transformation. You've got to do a little bit more context layering here to actually tell the AI agent that you've just built to go and reference and access certain areas and buckets, if you like, different labels and things like that. It's not going into relational database tables. It's very different because it's much more visual in a way, but you've ingested everything in together. You've got everything in there, including your financial data, your payroll data, your CRM data, and all in one. So it's exceptionally exciting. So when you go and build the agent, and we've been building a couple of agents for clients on top of these data lakehouses. In fact, we've been building quite a few, and there's some incredibly exciting things that we're building. We're building analysis and data pools combined with some AI that is giving completely incredible insights. And these insights are sort of hunches that the business has been waiting for end of month reconciliations that might take 6 or 12 or 15 days into the next month to actually pull together from a data warehouse, right? With an old, Power BI dashboard or, an old sort of hacked together spreadsheet that's been running the business for 20 years type thing, right?
Mhm.
And we can produce these agents, these amazing dashboard agents or these visualization agents and things like that to actually find this information and then give the automation that we're talking about, the autonomy that we're talking about, actually can give insights behind that in real time. We're talking cohort analysis. We're talking distribution analysis. We're talking ratios. We're talking some incredible stuff that can be spun up in weeks, not just
Mhm.
months. And that's the first one. The other one is, we're building finance agents for organizations. And these finance agents, we give them a name and they might be called Freddie from finance or something. And basically, Freddie will go and actually do some end of month stuff in real time for you on the end of month. So if you're right there on June 30, it will actually look back on the whole year and give you today, actually, as the sales close out at 6 p.m., let's say, if you're a financial institution, this is actually in real time what's been happening. And that is not waiting for reconciliations and things like that. So incredibly exciting, many different layers to it. James, question for you. What about in the regulated industries? What
Mhm.
about in the finance and the aged care and the law and all those sort of areas? Are they doing the same? Is it fairly open and is it data lakehouses being built? Is data, and data sovereignty a really critical piece? And are they got the, not just being brave, but do they have the regulatory oversight or regulatory powers to be able to build these agents on top of this sort of information?
Yeah, the desire is there and it's huge, and the motivation is huge. And some organizations are finally getting on top of it. And it's not a new technical thing that's been achieved. It's that now there are people who are close enough to some of these organizations who have the capabilities to build these things in the way that they need to be built.
Mm.
And that's not everybody. Like, for example, if you're working with government and you're working with constituent data, like, for example, a driver's license, if you want to put that information somewhere that isn't Australia, that's basically a non starter. And so it's not quite as easy for somebody working for a local government or a state government or a regulated organization to just go, yeah, I'll take that software as a service off the shelf and roll it out. Or if you're a financial planner, like, you need to go and get pre-approval from your financial licensee or your dealer group or what have you in order to adopt anything to do with AI right now, because they are so aware of the risks.
Mm.
And what the awareness of the risks hasn't manifested as broadly yet is finely tuned and finely honed methods for addressing each of those risks. So I'm here to tell everybody out there who's in these regulated sectors right now that it's not just possible to solve these kinds of problems. It's imperative that you do for
Yeah.
all of our benefit. And these technical capabilities are not new either. They've been around for a very long time. It looks a lot less like prompt engineering and looks a lot more like good infrastructure engineering and good networking and security, and having an understanding of how those things play with AI systems and inference-based systems and where inference is and where the data goes and how it's stored, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we're finally starting to catch up, and I'm really, really pleased to see some of the conversations that we're having in the Asian disability care sector, for example, at the moment. Big motivation to find efficiencies there. And they're now getting pretty creative and asking a lot of the right people, how can we improve the quality of our case notes? Because we have workforce problems. We can barely hire anyone. And the people who are so desperate to work in this sector often have English as a second or a third language. And so when they put their care notes in, they've done the best that they possibly can, but it's not good enough for a compliance audit, for example.
Mm.
So how do we bridge that divide? And those are the kinds of problems that we're really excited to be starting to solve, and in ways that are all onshore, all secure, and all completely controlled by these organizations. And it's using just some pretty old ideas applied to some new technologies, which is really exciting.
James, does everybody have messy data? Is it a
Yes. The short answer is yes. The
because
question is how much and where.
yeah, and how you want to use it, right? And in terms of the automation that you want to do, and the success and the outputs that you want to generate, the format that you
Mm,
want to get, you don't want to do band-aid work, do you? And I think the shift that we're
mm,
talking about here is critical around not band-aiding over existing broken both processes that are broken, but also band-aiding over data that is potentially not quite right.
and how can you use AI to make your data set more complete? How
Yeah.
can you use AI in a structured and auditable way to improve the quality of your data? It
Mm.
is not just possible, it's actually a really great application of an LLM or an agentic system to go out to public sources and pull in information that is relevant and cited and store the URL, store the PDF, store the text that you extracted, whatever. As long as there's a place that you can point to and go, that's an authoritative source and that's where we got it. Like that's just as good as any brokered data that you'd pay, you know, thousands of dollars for on the internet, isn't it,
Yeah.
Luke?
Yeah, it is, mate. It is. And I suppose let's take that automation that we were holding on from earlier and ask, in terms of this messy world of unstructured and messy data, what was, part of that process that you assumed a human had to handle? The reading, the interpreting, the human in the loop
Mm,
part, the judging, most importantly, the judging. That part that you thought was off limits is probably the part that is now you can actually automate. So probably jot it down if you're listening and you're thinking, okay, so what is an opportunity here? What is the bit that I could actually now automate within the organization?
mm,
And yeah, let's keep moving to the final segment, which is what this means. Let's look at it, this what this whole means before you build, because it's one thing
mm,
talking about it, and it's another thing actually building it. And if you've got to look in, from a shift to actually understanding and interpreting it, whether you bring people in or you try and do it internally, the before you build pays off. Like you've just heard about the data side.
mm.
The data is critical, but also the strategic. Talking to people that understand how to do it, getting confidence with it and practical with it, and things like that. So James, question for you: what's a trap? What's one of the things that
Mm,
basically people automate that feels productive, but is actually the low value part of the process? They're not actually
mhm.
doing it. And we talked offline about they think they're doing AI, but they're not actually doing AI or even automation. They might be just doing some workflow design in Zapier. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good question. And it makes me wonder about somebody's understanding of the capabilities that we have at hand. And it takes me back to some of the things we've already talked about. So unstructured versus structured data. We can work with unstructured data now. Tick. Automation versus autonomy is the other one. So automation being the rules based, if this then that, or hierarchical decision making trees or whatever, versus autonomy where you actually give a system a job to do that may be a little bit fuzzy in its definition, but the system has enough embedded intelligence, you might say, to make something happen with the tools that you've given it. And that's where I think the opportunity lies. I think it really lies in understanding which parts of your job do you do and do you spend a lot of time on that really shouldn't be done by somebody with your level of expertise or your level of capability or whatever.
or
What
time.
can, or
You don't have
yeah,
any time to do it. Yeah.
yeah, that's right. Well, yeah, what are the things that are falling off the list repeatedly every week that could be automated or could be handed off as a job to an autonomous system? And that feels low value because it's low value to you, but it becomes disproportionately high value when you can do it faster and cheaper and better. If you're ticking all three of those boxes on something, you're probably onto something that's valuable from a business perspective. And this is all balanced with the fact that the high value parts of processes are sometimes judgment based, and human in the loop as a way of solving that accountability problem that we have with systems. You can see it one of two ways. You can see it as the human is in the loop and they're the one that's making the decision because that's the person that we trust to make those decisions. Conversely, you could see it as the system is protected by a meat shield, which is a person.
A meat
And
shield.
yeah, and
Love it.
a little bit blunt and crude, but it does the job, right? And that's basically a great liability shield for a business to be able to say, oh, we trained that person, and we, that's the dark side of the human in the loop conversation. But if we are all working together and we're all aligned to each other's goals, we're probably going to be smarter about it. We're going to say, okay, let's get elements of an automated system and let's get elements of an autonomous system. And then let's give somebody the responsibility to look after that system and we empower them with that responsibility. But let's not make that person make menial decisions, because at the end of the day, we know that automated systems are far better at making low risk, high volume decisions than a person is, let alone somebody that you're paying 100, 120, $150,000 a year, right?
Mm.
Don't go automatically to customer service in your business because it's easy to think about how it might be implemented. Try and think about, okay, what are the sticky things where we have intractable bottlenecks because of our access to certain skills or our access to certain people. And let's see how we might actually implement there safely and for the benefit of all the stakeholders involved.
Yeah, I agree, mate. And often people start with tools, don't they? They often start, with the tool selection, the technology selection before defining the actual problem. And I often use a little framework that would help many different people here, I think, listening to this episode, and that is the 4 Ps. And you can actually frame these up. You could go to Claude and come up with a framework for me, and you could actually do this yourself if you wanted to. But this is one that I always use. It's problem, and then it's people, then it's process, and then it's product. And the only reason I don't have PPPT for tools, I just like the alliteration of 4 Ps, right? And so the first one is the problem or the pain point. The next one is bringing your people along for the journey, the human shift. Talked about that quite a bit. The next one is the process that you're actually going to change and transform, not just band-aid over what we just said a couple of minutes ago. And the final one is the product and the tool. So product and tool are the same things. What I wanted to highlight there was we don't select the tool first. We don't sort of go, you need this tool, and then let's square peg in a round hole, put this into the organization. It never works, right, James? It just does not. In long term, you're not going to get the value back, the return on investment, the bang for buck, and B, your people are going to get offside. And, you maybe have too many meat shields then that are actually going to be, actually going to be problematic. So I think the big thing there is, making sure that you go on a journey and you do tool selection last. So if you're going to go and build this type of automation and you're going to go and build the autonomy side of what James talks about, and you need to look at the tools last, and just don't settle for the first one that comes along, or some advisor who you see at a Barbie who's a board member or something like that goes, you should be using this. It's
or your local managed services provider. Don't automatically assume that your IT expert is going to be an AI expert or a software expert or what have you. And true to form, like some of our best referrals come from IT shops, because they just know that this is as much software development and process improvement and change management as it is technology, like a traditional IT management. So just because Microsoft provides it doesn't mean an MSP is going to be your automatic go-to for these kinds of problems.
Yeah.
Doesn't work.
Yeah, absolutely. And so let's get the crystal ball out, James. So a year on from now, what separates the businesses that got this right from this conversation today, episode 24, from the ones that are still building in the old way? Will there be any left in a year's time that are building in the same way? I mean, it's so.
I think it's the ones that get the balance right.
Yeah.
And the balance point for your organization is not the same as for every other organization either, because just like people, there are infinite individual differences between organizations. And if you try and take the same approach to every single scenario, you're going to end up with a homogeneous result that doesn't allow you to play to all of your strengths. And that requires you to take a strategic approach, understanding what your core competencies are, what your stakeholders expect and want and need from you, and then designing systems around those fundamentals. And those fundamentals will lead to conversations about existing processes which may be deterministic or logical or if this then that. And you can come at them with a new fresh set of eyes and you can go, I see why that was such an amazing process, but what if we could collapse that from 9 steps into 2? And that doesn't happen very often in conversations about technology, but it's happening in almost every conversation I have about technology with clients and potential clients at the moment. So the ones that get it right are the ones that collapse down the right processes, not just collapse down processes that are intuitive and the ones that come to mind first. How about you, Lou?
Yeah, wise words. And it's exactly the same. We often, at the end of our rewire sessions, which basically are around transformation of processes into agents that actually can help. And there's 2 parts to our sessions. At the end of those sessions, we want to come up with what your old process was, and where we put up a little robot and a hand where the agent and the human can interact together. And how can we reduce all of that complexity that you've been doing on the left side of the screen with what's on the right side of the screen? And I think that
Mhm.
mapping is critical to getting that right before you build anything. And often, we have 10 people in the room. We always aim for 3 agents each, or, we call them agents, but they could just be a little, we put a C at the bottom or an A at the bottom. Could you build this yourself in Claude or Claude Cowork, or is it an actual agent you actually go and, autonomous agent
Mhm.
you need to build? And it's wonderful to see, because you've got 10 people in the room, you've got 30 agent ideas, you've got potentially automation ideas mixed in with that, but it's fantastic. So it's probably a good time to wrap up, James, and go for your takeaway. What's your key takeaway today from this awesome episode 24?
My key takeaway is that just because you assume that something's going to go a certain way, or based on the things that you've learned in a 20, 30-year career, that things are just going to be the same all over again. Things like AI just sometimes have a habit of surprising you. There's always more to learn. And whether you learn that yourself or you find the kind of people that you trust to develop those capabilities within your organizations, it doesn't really matter. What I hope you walk away with after this session is a renewed sense that, hey, there might be something out there for us. And we want to work with somebody who wants to do it the way that we want to do it. And that's what's going to set an organization apart, Lou. How about you?
Yeah, look, I'm going to come back to the tool selection. I'm going to come back to all of this you've heard today. 2 key things for me. One was the tools. You start with the problem or the pain point, then you move in straight into people in your organization and make sure, even if you're 5 staff or 500 staff, you make sure everybody's going on the journey. You then go through the process re-engineering of what you're doing, and then you put in the product, you put in the tools. So, the 4 Ps are really important for me. And the other one is about data mess. I, I just love, start with the messiest high value process first. Start actually doing the hard work. Use what James talked about in terms of using AI to actually dive into your SharePoint and say, how would you clean this up? Even if it's Copilot. Co-work now in Copilot is pretty cool, by the way.
Mhm.
I don't like to
Mhm.
endorse too much in that MS world, mate, but I've been doing a lot of training with clients recently, and co-work that is now out of the frontier labs
Yeah.
of Microsoft. It's actually pretty cool. And you can set up a schedule and you can set up cool things. But go into your train it, the first thing you should do is go and tell it to go and look at, what does my SharePoint look like? And to James's point,
Mm.
fix that up. So let's talk about next week. What's happening in the next episode?
This week we talked about what's changed and how to think about it. But next week we're going to go to the question that comes right after, which is, out of everything in your business, where do you actually want to point this? Because knowing what's possible is one thing, but knowing what it's worth and what's worth doing, most importantly, is another. So next episode is about identifying the opportunities that AI should genuinely be tackling for you, and maybe some of the things that are better left alone. So the perfect next step from today, Lou. We'll hope to see you then.
Awesome. And we'll be seeing some more sponsors here coming up, just like Prompt Cowboy. And thanks to the team at promptcowboy.ai. If today's session made you think about how you can actually get your team using AI and automation properly, go and check out their agentic prompt, as I said, and it's an awesome little feature. It's the starting point for you, and it's the starting point for a lot of organizations of what they're missing. So yeah, trot on over, right on over to promptcowboy.ai.
Thank you for joining Zero Shot. That's it for today's session. And look, thanks not just for listening, but for staying with us all the way through. It means everything to us. And it's what keeps this show going, Llew.
It certainly does. And we built Zero Shot with something simple. The right information delivered straight at the right time. Every week. We're so regular, aren't we, James?
Very regular.
Very regular. And it can change how our entire generation of business leaders navigate this AI revolution. And that's what we do. We show up every week to do it. So for the builders, the skeptics, the strategists, and everybody in between who are trying to make sense of this incredible space and, who are actually moving the needle out there in their industry. So welcome. We love you. And this is who it's for, and this is why we're here.
If you're confused about something, if there's a topic you can't find a straight answer on, or if you even heard something today that you're like, hey, can you guys just demystify that or put that in layman's terms for us? Please tell us. Leave a comment, leave a message, drop it wherever you find us because we read everything. Yenny is an absolute trooper. She does so much reading. It's unbelievable. And we promise you this, if you have that question, someone else does too. It's an iceberg. We'll build an episode around it. That's how this show gets better. You're a part of us improving. So please don't hold back.
Yeah, and it's how Ben Cooper, our recent guest, found us, right? Like, that was an awesome episode, the last episode. Check it out. The team at RGA reached out. We got on really well with them. We had an awesome conversation with Ben and the team. If you like that and you want to have a chat, don't hold back. Reach out to us and we'd love to keep exploring conversations and the value. So yeah, if today was useful, the best thing you can do now is follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube, wherever you're listening. It costs you nothing to do it, right? It's free. And it's what keeps this mission alive and in front of all the people that need it. So find us on the LinkedIn page, search Zero Shot, go and have a look at zeroshot.com.au. Follow James on LinkedIn and all the TikTok, he's famous on TikTok as well. and myself as well, Llew Jury. We're on Instagram and Facebook and TikTok and all of that. That's where we put our short form content together. So, trot on over, Prompt Cowboy style to that. And if there is someone in your world, just quickly, who's feeling like they're trying to navigate this AI, area and they don't know where to start, they're feeling a bit overwhelmed by it all, share this episode with them. And that's how we grow.
One more shout out, Yenny Larotta. Thank you as always for all of your hard work, our amazing producer. And to all our audience out there, stay sharp, stay sovereign, and we'll see you in the next episode. Take care. Bye-bye.
Cheers.